I still remember the smell of the city streets, a mix of greasy food and exhaust fumes that clung to my skin like a bad habit. It was a constant reminder that I was just another forgotten soul, lost in the sea of faces that rushed past me every day. I had been living on the streets for months, struggling to find a job that would give me a chance to turn my life around. The homeless shelter was my temporary refuge, a place where I could grab a hot meal and a few hours of sleep without fear of being rousted by the police. But it was a bleak existence, devoid of dignity and hope. I felt like I was drowning in a world that seemed determined to keep me down. As I walked through the city streets, I couldn't help but notice the towering skyscrapers that seemed to mock me with their grandeur. I felt like a tiny ant scurrying around the feet of giants, insignificant and powerless. The thought of applying for jobs was a daunting task, a never-ending cycle of rejection and disappointment. But I refused to give up. I scoured the job listings, applying to anything that seemed remotely possible. And then, one day, I got a call back. A company was willing to interview me for a position, and I felt a glimmer of hope that I hadn't felt in months. I spent hours preparing for the interview, rehearsing my answers and trying to make myself look presentable. I borrowed a suit from the shelter and did my best to scrub the street smell off my skin. As I walked into the office building, I felt a sense of pride and determination that I hadn't felt in a long time. The interviewer was a woman with a kind smile and a firm handshake. She asked me questions about my qualifications and experience, and I did my best to spin my limited skills into something impressive. As the interview drew to a close, I felt a sense of hope that I hadn't felt in months. And then the question came. "So where do you live?" she asked, her eyes narrowing slightly as she waited for my response. I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. I didn't want to lie, but I knew that the truth would be a deal-breaker. As I looked into her eyes, I knew that my fate was already sealed. But I had no idea just how much that moment would change my life forever. I walked into the office building, trying to hide my nervousness behind a confident smile. The sleek glass doors and polished marble floors seemed to gleam with an air of success, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of intimidation. I had spent hours preparing for this interview, researching the company, practicing my responses, and rehearsing my presentation. I was determined to make a good impression. As I waited in the lobby, I couldn't help but notice the curious glances from the employees passing by. I tried to ignore them, focusing on my breathing and mentally rehearsing my opening lines. Finally, the receptionist called my name, and I stood up, smoothing out my wrinkled clothes. The interviewer, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, greeted me with a firm handshake. We walked to a conference room, where he began to ask me questions about my qualifications and experience. I answered confidently, trying to showcase my skills and passion for the industry. The conversation flowed smoothly, and I felt a sense of hope rising within me. Maybe, just maybe, I had a chance at this job. But as the interview drew to a close, I noticed a subtle change in the interviewer's tone. His questions became more probing, more personal. Where did I live? How did I plan to commute to work? I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. The truth was, I was homeless, living in a shelter and struggling to make ends meet. I tried to gloss over the truth, but the interviewer's eyes narrowed, his expression growing colder. "I see," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Well, thank you for coming in today. We'll be in touch soon." I left the office building feeling elated, thinking I had done well. But as I walked back to the shelter, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't until I received the rejection letter a few days later that I realized the truth. The company had rejected me because of my homelessness. The words stung, like a slap in the face. I felt a wave of despair wash over me, threatening to consume me whole. How could they do this? Didn't they understand that I was more than just my circumstances? I was a person with skills and dreams and hopes. The rejection letter seemed to mock me, its polite phrases and empty apologies a cruel joke. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of despair, unable to escape the crushing weight of my own failure. The world seemed to be spinning around me, a blur of faces and sounds and colors. I stumbled through the streets, lost and alone, unsure of where to turn. And then something inside me snapped. A spark of anger flared to life, and I felt a newfound determination coursing through my veins. I would prove them wrong. I would show them that I was more than just a homeless person. I would rise above this rejection and make them regret ever saying no to me. But for now, the question lingered. How would I bounce back from this crushing blow? As I walked out of that office building, I couldn't shake off the feeling of rejection and disappointment that lingered deep within me. The words of the interviewer still echoed in my mind, a harsh reminder of the reality I faced. But little did I know, my life was about to take a drastic turn, one that would change the course of my destiny forever. I found myself wandering aimlessly through the streets, trying to make sense of it all. The city seemed to be moving at a frantic pace, with people rushing to and fro, while I stood still, frozen in time. I needed a refuge, a place to clear my mind and gather my thoughts. That's when I stumbled upon a small, quaint coffee shop tucked away in a quiet alley. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and I knew I had to step inside. As I waited for my coffee, I noticed a peculiar old man sitting by the window, sipping on a cup of tea. He seemed to be in his 60s, with a kind face and a twinkle in his eye. There was something about him that drew me in, something that made me want to approach him and strike up a conversation. I walked up to him, introduced myself, and we started talking. His name was Jack, and he was a retired entrepreneur who had built his fortune from scratch. He listened intently as I shared my story, and his expression changed from interest to empathy. For the first time in a long while, I felt like someone truly understood me. Jack asked me about my passions, my skills, and my dreams. He listened attentively as I spoke, and his eyes lit up with excitement. "You know, my young friend," he said, "I think I can help you. I think you have the potential to create something truly remarkable." Those words sparked a fire within me. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of hope, a sense of purpose. Jack became my mentor, guiding me through the process of crafting a business plan, teaching me the ins and outs of entrepreneurship, and sharing his insights on innovation. The wheels began to turn in my mind, and I started to envision a future that was vastly different from the one I had been living. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, I worked tirelessly to bring my vision to life. I poured my heart and soul into my new venture, and slowly but surely it began to take shape. The doubts and fears that once plagued me began to fade away, replaced by a newfound sense of confidence and determination. I was on the cusp of something extraordinary, something that would change the course of my life forever. The question was, would I be able to see it through? Would I be able to overcome the obstacles that lay ahead and turn my dream into a reality? Only time would tell, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of excitement and anticipation for the future. The turning point had finally arrived, and I was ready to take on the world. As I poured my heart and soul into my business, the early days were a struggle. I had to juggle multiple tasks at once, from managing finances to finding new clients. There were times when I doubted myself, when the thought of giving up seemed like the easiest option. But I refused to let my circumstances define me. I was determined to succeed, to prove to myself and everyone else that I was worthy of a chance. I remember the first time I landed a major client. It was a small business, but it was a start. I worked tirelessly to deliver exceptional results, and slowly but surely, word began to spread about my company. More clients started to trickle in, and with them, revenue. I was able to move out of the shelter and into a small apartment, a modest but significant upgrade. As the business grew, so did my team. I hired new employees, each one bringing their unique skills and perspectives to the table. Together, we worked towards a common goal, our collective energy and enthusiasm propelling us forward. I was proud to be their leader, to be able to provide them with opportunities and guidance. But as we grew, I began to realize that my initial motivation, revenge against the company that had rejected me, was no longer the driving force behind my actions. Success, not revenge, had become my goal. I wanted to prove to myself that I was capable of achieving greatness, that I was more than just a homeless person who had been written off by society. Our new office was a testament to our growth. It was a beautiful space, filled with natural light and energized by the hum of creativity. I loved walking through the doors every morning, feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment. We were no longer just a small startup. We were a force to be reckoned with. And yet, despite all our success, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. We were still a relatively small company, but we were growing fast. What would happen when we finally reached the top? Would we be able to compete with the giants of our industry, including the company that had once rejected me? Only time would tell, but I was eager to find out. I still remember the day I stood outside those sleek glass doors, my resume in hand, my heart full of hope. The same doors that now swung open to welcome me as the new owner of the company. It was a moment of pure vindication, the sweet taste of revenge that I had been craving for so long. As I walked into the headquarters, I couldn't help but notice the looks of shock and awe on the faces of the employees. They whispered to each other, their eyes darting towards me with a mix of curiosity and fear. I reveled in their discomfort, knowing that I was now the one in control. The former interviewer, the one who had rejected me all those years ago, now stood before me, a hint of recognition in his eyes. He looked older, wearier, and I could sense the weight of regret bearing down on him. "Welcome to the company," I said, my voice firm but measured. "I trust you're aware of the changes that have taken place." He nodded, his eyes cast downward, and I could sense the shame emanating from him. I felt a pang of satisfaction, knowing that he was now an employee, working for the very person he had once deemed unworthy. As I made my way to the boardroom, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. My company had surpassed the one that had rejected me, and now I was the one calling the shots. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. This was just the beginning. I had achieved what I had set out to do, but there was still so much more to conquer. The world was my playground now, and I was ready to take on the next challenge. But as I looked around the room, I couldn't shake off the feeling that there was something more, something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. A sense of unease, a sense of uncertainty. What did I do next? Did I continue to bask in the glory of my revenge, or did I use this as a stepping stone to achieve even greater heights? The possibilities were endless, and I knew that the world was waiting for my next move. As I walked through the city streets, I couldn't help but notice the familiar sight of homeless people huddled in alleys and doorways. It was a painful reminder of the struggles I had once faced, and the rejection I had endured at the hands of the very company I now owned. But today, I was determined to make a difference. I had launched a philanthropic initiative to help the homeless, and I was eager to see its impact firsthand. My team and I had spent countless hours researching and planning, identifying the most critical needs of the homeless community and developing strategies to address them. We had partnered with local shelters and community centers, providing funding, resources, and volunteer support to help them expand their services. And now, as I visited these organizations, I was seeing the fruits of our labor. At a homeless shelter in the heart of the city, I met a young woman named Sarah, who had been struggling to get back on her feet after losing her job and her apartment. With the help of our initiative, she had received counseling, job training, and temporary housing, and was now on the path to stability and self-sufficiency. Her eyes sparkled with gratitude as she told me her story, and I felt a surge of pride and purpose. As I continued my tour, I met many more people like Sarah, each with their own story of struggle and resilience. I saw families who had been reunited thanks to our initiative's housing assistance program, and individuals who had found employment through our job training and placement services. I saw the impact we were having on the community, and it filled me with a sense of joy and fulfillment. But what struck me most was the realization that giving back was not just a moral obligation or a PR strategy. It was the true meaning of success. As I looked out at the faces of the people we were helping, I knew that this was what it was all about. This was the purpose of my wealth and influence, and I was determined to continue using it to make a difference. And yet, as I stood there, basking in the warmth of our initiative's success, I couldn't shake off the feeling that there was still so much more to be done. How would I balance my philanthropic efforts with the demands of running my business? Would I be able to sustain this level of giving and still drive the company forward? These were the questions that swirled in my mind as I walked away from the shelter, already thinking about the next phase of our initiative and the impact we could have on the world. As I stood in front of the sleek, silver elevator that led to the rooftop office of my company, I couldn't help but think about how far I'd come. The once homeless man who was rejected at a job interview now owned the very company that had said no to him. But with great success comes great responsibility, and I had been feeling an overwhelming sense of duty to use my wealth and influence to make a lasting impact. I thought about my legacy and what I wanted to leave behind when my time on this earth was over. I wanted to be remembered for more than just my business acumen and my bank account. I wanted to be remembered for the positive change I brought to the world. That's why I decided to establish a foundation dedicated to providing support and resources to those in need. It would be a way for me to carry on my philanthropic work, even after I was gone. The thought sent a surge of excitement through me as I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. The process of setting up the foundation was not an easy one. There were countless meetings with lawyers and financial advisors, debates over the mission and vision, and decisions to be made about who would run the day-to-day operations. But I was driven by a clear sense of purpose, and I pushed forward with determination. As the foundation began to take shape, I couldn't help but think about the people who had been by my side throughout my journey. My family members who had always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. My friends who had stood by me through thick and thin. And my colleagues who had worked tirelessly to help me build my business from the ground up. I knew that starting a foundation would not only change the lives of those it served, but also have an impact on my personal life and relationships. I would have to learn to balance my time and energy, juggling the demands of running a business with the responsibilities of leading a non-profit organization. But as I looked out at the city skyline, I knew it was all worth it. This was my chance to leave a lasting legacy, to make a real difference in the world, and I was ready to take on the challenge. The foundation's headquarters would be located in a beautiful, historic building in the heart of the city. I had been drawn to its ornate architecture and stunning views, and I knew it would be the perfect place to bring my vision to life. As I stood in front of the building, feeling the warm sun on my skin and the gentle breeze in my hair, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment wash over me. This was just the beginning of an exciting new chapter in my life, and I couldn't wait to see what the future held for my foundation and for me. I remember the day I stood in front of the dilapidated building where I once laid my head, wondering how I was going to make it. Now, I was standing in front of a gleaming skyscraper that I owned, thinking about what was next. I had conquered the world, but I knew that there was still so much more to explore. I started thinking about new business ventures and opportunities that I could sink my teeth into. As I stepped into my high-rise office, I was greeted by a sea of new faces, all of whom were eager to work with me on my next big project. We brainstormed ideas, tossing around concepts that I had never even considered before. We talked about innovative ways to tackle some of the world's most pressing problems, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement. This was the kind of work that I had always wanted to do, and now I had the resources and the talent to make it happen. One of my new business partners, a sharp-witted woman named Sophia, approached me with an idea for a sustainable energy project that could revolutionize the way we power our homes and our cities. I was intrigued, and we spent the next hour delving into the details of the project. As we talked, I couldn't help but think about how far I had come. From the streets to the boardroom, it had been a wild ride. But with all of the excitement and growth came a sense of introspection. I found myself reflecting on the journey, thinking about the lessons I had learned along the way. I thought about the people who had doubted me, the ones who had said that I would never make it. And I thought about the ones who had believed in me, who had given me a chance when no one else would. As I stood in my office, looking out over the city, I realized that I had finally found what I had been searching for all along. It wasn't just about the money or the power, it was about the impact. I had made a difference in the world, and I knew that I would continue to do so. But as I gazed out at the horizon, I couldn't help but wonder, what's next? I still remember the streets where I used to sleep, the benches where I'd rest my weary head, and the soup kitchens that provided me with a warm meal on a cold day. As I walk through these familiar places now, I'm struck by the realization that I've come full circle. The man who was once rejected by the very company I now own is a distant memory, yet the lessons I learned along the way remain etched in my mind like scars on a warrior's body. I think back to the friends I made on the streets, the ones who became my family when I had none. Some of them are still struggling, still fighting to make ends meet, while others have found their own path to success. I've been fortunate enough to help some of them, to give back to the community that gave me so much when I had nothing. It's a feeling that's hard to describe, a sense of pride and purpose that goes beyond mere wealth and power. As I look around, I see the city in a different light. The skyscrapers that once seemed so intimidating now feel like a testament to human ingenuity and perseverance. The people rushing to and fro are no longer just faceless strangers. They're individuals with their own stories, their own struggles, and their own triumphs. I've come to realize that success is not just about achieving a goal. It's about the journey itself. It's about the people you meet, the lessons you learn, and the love you share along the way. I think about my family, my friends, and my community, and I know that I'm not alone. I'm part of a larger tapestry, a web of relationships that give my life meaning and purpose. As I stand here reflecting on my journey, I feel a sense of closure. The chapter of my life that began on those streets is finally coming to a close, and a new one is beginning. I'm not the same man I was all those years ago, and yet I'm still the same. I'm still the man who refused to give up, who refused to lose hope, and who refused to let his circumstances define him. I take a deep breath, feeling the cool breeze fill my lungs, and I know that I'm ready for whatever comes next. I'm ready to share my story with the world, to tell them that no matter where they come from or what they're going through, they too can achieve greatness. They too can come full circle and find their own sense of closure and new beginnings. But what message do I want to share with the world? That's a story for another time. As I stand here today, reflecting on the journey that has brought me to this moment, I am reminded of the power of perseverance and determination. From the depths of homelessness to the heights of billionaire status, my story is a testament to the human spirit's capacity to overcome even the most daunting challenges. But it's not just about me. It's about the countless others who have struggled, who have been marginalized and oppressed, who have been told they're not enough. It's about the importance of kindness and compassion, of recognizing the inherent worth and dignity in every human being. As I look back on the lessons I've learned, I am struck by the realization that success is not just about achieving a goal, but about the impact we have on others along the way. It's about the relationships we build, the lives we touch, and the differences we make. And so, as I stand before you today, I want to leave you with a final message. It's a call to action, a reminder that each and every one of us has the power to make a difference. Don't just sit back and watch the world go by. Get involved, take risks, and push boundaries. To those who are struggling, I see you. I hear you, and I believe in you. Don't give up even when the odds seem insurmountable. Keep pushing forward even when it feels like the world is pushing back. And to those who are in positions of power, I urge you to use your privilege to make a positive impact. Remember that with great power comes great responsibility, and that the decisions we make have real-life consequences for others. As I close this chapter of my life, I want to leave you with a final thought. The world is a complex and messy place, full of challenges and uncertainties. But it's also a place of beauty and wonder, full of possibilities and promise. So let's make a choice together to be the change we want to see in the world. Let's choose to be kind, to be compassionate, and to be courageous. Let's choose to make a difference, to leave a mark on this world that will outlast us. And when the doubts creep in, and the fears arise, and the uncertainty seems overwhelming, just remember, it's okay to be scared. It's okay to be unsure, but it's not okay to give up. Because in the end, it's not about where we come from or what we've been through. It's about where we're going and what we're willing to do to get there. So let's take a deep breath. Let's stand up straight, and let's face the future with hope, with courage, and with determination.